Welcome to Mindful Talk, brief conversations about mindfulness in the workplace and at home. I am your host, Lauren Wessinger.
And I'm your host, Misti Anderson. And this podcast is brought to you by the Mindful Project.
The Mindful Project helps you elevate the culture of your business by bringing mindfulness practice to you and your staff through in-person and virtual learning. Contact us through our website, themindfulproject.co, for more information. Okay, friends, welcome back to Mindful Talk. This week, Misti and I are talking about recovering from an injury. Hi, Misti.
Hi, Lauren. I'm so glad to be here today. Most of you know I had hip surgery back in April, and this is kind of where this spurred from because honestly, a lot of our topics come from, I think, our struggles, just what we deal with on the reg. And this was something that, tomorrow is September 1st, and that is the day I'm officially released to do anything per my surgery. So from April to September, I've had a lot of limitations and a lot of growing and learning. So I'm excited to talk about this topic because what I've found is through my connection with other people in my struggles and getting through the recovery, I found that we all kind of share that same common thread. And I think it's a conversation worth having.
Definitely. Are you glad you had the surgery? Are you glad you got it done?
Yeah, I am. So I had a labral tear, which I think you and I had talked about before. 90% of cadavers have labral tears. And those of us that are extra hard on our bodies, or perhaps we were not appropriately practicing yoga for many years and doing too much, they just snap. And it can be really painful. And so I was really concerned because I also have bursitis on the outside of my hips. And I know that so many people suffer from this. So if you're listening and you have hip bursitis or any kind of bursitis, I'm with you. It's awful. It's an ongoing thing that you have to manage. So for me, it was two-part. It was, is the pain going to go away from the surgery? And then also, will I be able to manage my bursitis? And I think overall, I'm very glad I had the surgery because I can forward fold without it hurting anymore. I can do a child's pose. Simple things that should have been simple really were painful. However, and this is where I think the mindfulness practice really becomes so important. I had the surgery. Yay, I can spread my leg and it doesn't hurt and I can lift my knee. But then I got really bad back pain from crutches. And then my gait got really off and the bursitis flared up. And so from that thing spurred all these other things that opened. And thankfully, I stayed pretty close to my physical therapist in regards to how I was feeling and emotionally and physically. And because I really wanted to be on the other side of it. And their instruction was take each day at a time and evaluate what is painful or sore in that day. Try not to jump ahead because that's what I would do. I'd be like, oh my gosh, I've had this surgery and now my sciatic's all flared it up. And I thought my sciatic was gone from pregnancy. And then your brain just starts to tumble. And so being really present in that day and okay, I woke up today and my hip feels okay, but I feel off and sometimes I would feel shorter, which sounds weird. And that was the crutches, I think, crutching down. And so as with most of our mindfulness practice, just taking it day by day and really evaluating what was going on in my own body was probably the most challenging part. But I am, to answer your original question, glad I did it. And I learned a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm fixed for the most part. I still am dealing with my bursitis. I think that's just a lifelong thing.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, I have a lot of tools and things I can do to kind of keep it at bay. And the most important part is strengthening. And, most of us steer away from the strengthening part. We'll do the yoga. We'll maybe go for the walks. We'll do the runs, but the strengthening is always the toughest part. And so I'm really trying to focus on that right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you got the surgery too. I remember it's probably hard for you to remember because you've been through so much since you had it, but I remember your pain. I really remember it from the time I met you um, until you had the surgery. And I remember you texted me one day and saying, "Oh my gosh, I have no pain when I do this and this and this," and so it's always a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
And you just have to make the decision and be happy with that decision. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you're right that so much comes out of that. I mean, I think the way mindfulness can really come into play when we're healing from something like that is through expectation.
Oh, yes.
Like you're young and healthy. And so your mind is in this stage you're at, like always going, always learning, opening to things. You've had a lot of change. Like you're in a really great phase of your life right now. And when you're physically, like all of a sudden the brakes are put on and you
Oh,
can't physically do your things, it's almost maddening, you
yep.
know? And so there's that expectation there, whether it's healing from surgery or injury, or even like being sick,
Yeah.
friends that especially that have had, gosh, long COVID,
Oh, right.
it's like the expectation of where I want to be and should be, and then the reality of where I am. That's a real tension filled place. And so our mindfulness practice teaches us to open to the reality of where we are, like you said, that day, because it changes every day. It can change every hour. And just nurturing what's needed that day. And I think that removes some of the resistance. Like, okay, right now it's like this. Right now, today, my hip is like this. My back is like this because of my hip. And just meeting each moment fresh. And, it's hard. It's easy to talk about, hard to do, like adapting as much as possible to the moment and being really kind to the process and to the time it takes.
I agree about the kindness. And I think it's funny how, your family and your friends really want to support you when you have an injury or surgery or you're recovering from something. And it comes a point where you just want to do it all yourself. And you just, for me, like in the beginning, like not being able to even go to the bathroom by myself because the toilet was too low. At first, it was like, okay, I can lean into this. Like, this is my journey. I signed up for this. But then there comes a point where you're just over it.
Mm.
And you have to dig really deep sometimes in the over it places. Where I live now in Colorado, there are so many professional athletes. It's insane. Like, I don't go run or walk with people for fear that they are like light years better than I am. But what I found as a common thread is even these professional elite athletes struggle with injury, recovery, and the mental aspect of all that entails. It's not just the mom, me, that has a lot going on in their house. Like they're looking at it from a professional perspective. And what does this do to my career? And so all of that added on top of I'm a mom and I have crutches and whatever it is, it can be a lot. And I've talked to several women here recently about managing expectations around our bodies and the changes that we all go through. Because, when you're 25, your body can do mostly everything. And you get to 40 and suddenly you start waking up in the morning and you're like, why does this hurt? Like I didn't even do anything. And so I'm really trying to lean in right now. It's really hard to, this is my body and I need to take care of it because I only get one of them. And the best thing that I can do is mindfully evaluate myself every morning. And so I used to be a lot more stickler about, here was my routine. I went for a walk or a run, and then I did yoga and whatever it was. I've found myself waking up more now post surgery and being like, how do I feel today? Like, what does both my mind and my body need? So this morning I woke up and I got right out of bed at 5, which was crazy. And we have the most beautiful stars you've ever seen in Colorado. It's especially where we live. They feel like they're right there. So I was like, you know what? it's beautiful, it's dark and quiet. I'm going to go for a hike. And so I did. And I came back. And normally I'd kind of ask myself, what's next? Like, should you move your body? Otherwise, I just felt tired and I wanted to get dressed. And so I did. I would even say 6 months ago, Misty would have kind of gotten my head and been like, no, 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 no. If you don't do yoga, blah, 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 blah. Now I'm just like, I got my hike in and that felt good. And that's for today. And my body feels good. And that's a blessing. And I'm grateful for that. And so tomorrow we'll see what it's like.
Yeah, that definitely comes with wisdom and age, doesn't it?
Yes. If you're listening and you're younger, please listen.
Right.
I'm not sure that I'm being serious though. I'm not sure anybody ever talked to me about you have one body, and like you really need to take care of it and respect it and be kind to it. Cause I sure as heck wasn't for like from age 20 to 32.
We hear that, but we don't think it applies to us. I mean, from the time I was, 15 to like 30, I was like, oh yeah, but that doesn't apply to me. My body's going to last forever. And
right. I know. And you
and
always
then,
I always thought I'd be able to do handstands and
right.
jump down into warrior two, no problem. And child's pose, come on. And now it's like, okay, here I go into child's pose. Let us pray that my hips survive. So
Here we go.
Yeah. And so it's back to what you said about expectations. It's really like I don't want to say the less you expect, the more reasonable your expectations are, the less you set your own brain up for failure. And it's kind of like starting where you are. It's that old phrase of this is where I am. Here's where I'm going to start. Tomorrow could be different.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, no question, it's a major setback, whether it's you or a professional athlete or gosh, anyone, it is a major setback and it takes time for the body to recover. I think I've mentioned this on a podcast before, but I will always believe that having to have surgery because of an active lifestyle is such a good reason to have surgery.
I agree.
I mean, the repercussions of not having an active lifestyle are so vast. Our bodies biologically are designed to move, and less people are moving, and so it's really been a big mind shift for me. Like I have the same hip thing, same details, some different details that Misty has. Mine isn't to the point of surgery yet. But I know it's from an active lifestyle and I'll take that. I'm not afraid of that. You know what I mean? It means that I have been really working my body and using my body and enjoying my body and moving and being active. And that's everything to me, so I'll take it. And so it's like a little perspective of, oh my gosh, this is a major setback, and how awesome that I probably have this injury from being an active human.
I agree. And it really is a great perspective, and it can kind of pull you out of things when you're in the middle of things.
Yeah.
So one of my best friends, she just had AC or MCL repair surgery on her knee. And she had, bless her heart, she has a chronic disease. And so and we've had her, Krishna, on the podcast before. I just remember about chronic. Okay. So she just suddenly had this accident and it messed up her knee. And so she needed to get it repaired. About 2 weeks before the injury happened, she had gotten back into walking with another girlfriend. And man, I could tell like she just had a fire that was lit inside of her about like her life has changed and she's kind of in a different chapter. And I think for the first time she felt like maybe she had some control over the situation. And so it's like true to the world, you're going along and you're feeling great about yourself. And then it's like, your MCL tears. So she has a wonderful mindfulness practice, and it got her to be really diligent about getting things fixed and being like, I want to take care of this because I want to take care of myself. So she got the repair done and these stitches kept busting open. So she was like, she had this great mindset, like I'm on the flip side, I'm going to recover. And then every time she would stand up or try to do anything, these stitches would pop. So they ended up having to go back in and re-stitch underneath because they had popped like a vessel with like there was a small little pinhole in the vessel and it kept leaking. So it was coming through those stitches. So that set her back like 6 weeks. It was a completely unexpected turn. And she thought she was having a routine surgery. And then now she's got to have two. And there was one day, like whenever it all happened, I could really tell that she was super overwhelmed and she kind of just wanted to cry. And we just have a pact between the two of us. When things seem really, really, really hard, we reach for our gratefulness practice, our gratitude practice. And like, what are you grateful for right now? And she said, I'm really glad that I have accessibility to do this because so many people don't. I'm glad I can get it repaired. And I'm really glad I know that I'm strong enough to make it through this. And to hear her say that was so awesome because she hasn't always been that strong in herself and her capabilities. And so I told her, I said, you know what? I know you can't say it right now, but be grateful for all you're learning and how much you're growing just from this setback. In the grand scheme of life, she's already like doing so much better and she's starting to walk and stuff like that. So in the grand scheme of things, I bet in 2 years, she hardly remembers this blip, but it's like that blip is giving her a lot of confidence because she's setting the right expectations for herself. And then that continues your practice, which I think is just a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
really proud of her.
it's that balance between honoring where she is or honoring where you are when you're in pain, right? And not bypassing that, but honoring where you are, leaning into that. And at the same time, because we are very tricky humans with our very expansive minds, at the same time, seeing the bigger perspective of the gratitude practice, and of the bigger perspective of this is a speed bump that's not going to last forever. And we really have to hold both, because if we stay in the details and the pain, we can get lost in that. And if we stay in the bigger perspective only, we are essentially pushing down what we're feeling. And so the real skilled practice comes in holding both perspectives, like the reality of what I'm feeling in this moment and knowing that the only truth in this life is that everything's going to change, including how I feel, including my body, including this pain. Holding both.
Yeah. And I want to encourage people, if you're listening right now and like you have an injury or you're recovering from surgery or something that happened and you're like, I got no gratitude and I'm feeling pretty, that's okay. And that's part of the process of getting through because eventually what I found, because I had woe is me moments too during my surgery recovery. And I just had to kind of sometimes check myself, like have a little pep talk with myself in my head. Like, what would I tell a friend? Like we always say, what would I say to them? If you were going through this, what would I say to Lauren? And I think it's a little bit easier to dig yourself out that way, to have a little compassion towards yourself. And it's really easy to kind of, why am I not better? Why did so and so have this injury and they can do this and I can't? Like even me to you, like you said, we have very similar injuries and things going on with our bodies, yet you haven't had to have surgery yet. I could have been like, well, why doesn't Lauren have to repair that? Like,
Right.
why am I the one that has to do it? But I really tried to look at it as, personally, I'm always very aware that healthcare is not something that we should take for granted as far as the healthcare system and the accessibility we have. I know tons of people that don't have that. So my gratitude practice goes to that a lot. I have doctors that can care for me. I have access to MRIs and medications. People don't have that.
Right.
And so when I got down as my woe is me, I often went to that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It helps you pull yourself out of your own experience, which can be really a painful place to be.
Yes.
And yeah, it helps you pull yourself out of those details because it's that second arrow that we talk about all the time. Like the surgery is the first arrow, or maybe the injury plus the surgery. Like that was pretty much unavoidable, and then the second arrow is the woe is me. Right. The second arrow is, oh my gosh, I'm going to feel this way forever. I should quit my job. I should stop trying to move to Colorado. None of this, it's all the things that we like lay on ourselves as a result. And so, yeah, the perspective and the gratitude when it's time and the reaching out to friends, all the things that help you kind of pull yourself out of that spiral of second arrow suffering. It's like the
Yes.
pain is the unavoidable, right? And the suffering is I don't want to say avoidable suffering, because let's be honest, we're human and we're going to
Yeah.
suffer, but we can work with the suffering, right?
Yeah. And if you are in a position, I'm sharing this as a tool because this is something I did. When you're laying there, it gets so boring, like so boring. And I don't want to watch any more Netflix, and I didn't want to read any more books. Um, what I did, and this sounds crazy, Lauren and I talked about many times about time blocking, and I time blocked some of my recovery. And it really helped me feel like the days weren't like 72 hours. And I'm not talking about like crazy things. Obviously, I had crutches and I couldn't do a lot, but like making sure I iced 5 times a day, making sure that I used heat 5 times a day, and like kind of knowing when I was going to do that, making sure I got up so many times a day. And I felt like those little things helped me move through my day, which helped move things along, because that's part of the muck, is being stuck. And no one likes
Mm.
it. I mean, it's like pandemic times 12, because you can't go anywhere and you literally can't get up. So I know that there are so many people that are, stuck in bed right now, or stuck on the couch because something happened to them, and you feel like you have no control, no control. And that's how I felt. And so I was like, okay, what would normal Misty do? Normal Misty would kind of take a look at her calendar and the things she wants to do, and I would kind of plot them for the day. I'm like, okay, so the things I can do are very limited. However, if I could plot them, and maybe if I had a time for Netflix, I wouldn't feel like I was so over it and so going crazy. And so I started to do that probably in week 2, and it really, really, really helped me. It helped me feel at least like I was accomplishing something. So when my friends would call and say, "How was today?" I'm like, today was awful. But I would say, you know what? I got all my icing done. I did my physical therapy. I walked to the bathroom 5 times. I made it up the stairs. Like they're so silly, but they're huge accomplishments in recovery. And if you don't recognize them and pay attention to them, it just feels like you're walking through quicksand and you're just trying to make it through each day.
Yeah, you created a little routine for yourself
Yeah.
because you couldn't do your normal routine. And we know that we thrive in routine, just like little kids. We're
Yep.
the same. And you were so wise to create that for yourself. I love it.
Well, most of my creations come from like, okay,
Pain.
well, and I'm like, I'm here, and
Yeah.
like my human nature is to want to wallow. But then I mean, this podcast helps me a ton. I'll say to myself, like, what would I say if we were talking about this on the podcast? I wouldn't tell someone to wallow around on it and just make it through the day. Like, I would give them some
Yeah.
encouragement about how you can make it through your day when it doesn't feel like you can.
Do you
Um,
think, like, for you, that the initial portion of time right after the surgery was just sort of in limbo land, and then once you were cleared a little bit from anesthesia and whatever, then you were able to do the routine and be more practical? Like, were there some days where you just needed to be a blob,
yeah.
and then you felt the energy kind of come back to do a little more?
Oh, for sure. And,
Yeah.
I mean, if you've had surgery or you've had an injury like that where you have to stay put for a while, I think for whatever reason, I've always heard day 3 after surgery is the worst. Have you heard that before?
I have heard that.
Okay. So every time I've had surgery, it's been true. So
Yeah.
I kind of know that like day 5, I'm probably going to feel more like inside, more like Misty,
Hmm.
less sleepy, less grouchy, less pain, all of that stuff. That's also like anytime I've ever had surgery, I'd say around day 4 is when I stop using pain meds, really.
Hmm.
And so then, you start to be more clear headed, because those things are just woof. I do not, I
They're
don't
so
like them.
strong.
They're so strong for me. They make me really itchy too, which I think is a side effect. But so I don't like to use them. Obviously, I know that sometimes you have to use them for pain reasons. And for me, it was around day 4 or 5 that I got some like mental clarity about, okay,
Mhm.
wow, now I can see this big brace on my leg, and we're going to have to figure out how to live together without driving one another bonkers, and me moving through this and potentially like my goal really, and I think I told you a long time ago, I really wanted to learn and grow and get better from this whole thing, not just like my hip, but how can I help women, especially because I know so many of them that are moms that are dealing with chronic pain right now that probably need to have something done, but they put it off because they're last. And there's no time that's good for having surgery or anything like that. There's never going to be a good time. We were retiring and moving across the country, and I threw in a surgery and physical therapy. But I did it for myself because I knew when I got here, the life I wanted to live didn't entail for me to have a gimpy hip. And so I put myself first, and it was really, really super hard. I changed the surgery date twice because I just couldn't, like, oh, that's so much. Like, who's going to cook the food and all of those things. So if you're feeling that and you know that you need to do something about yourself, I just encourage you, it's all going to be there. And honestly, everyone around you is going to grow from it. And you're going to see things like I've said before. I learned that what my kids can do that I didn't think they could do. So I just encourage you to put yourself first in that respect. If there is something that you need to take care of, and the daunting task of the flip side is what's holding you back, because that's what was holding me back. I wasn't scared of surgery. I wasn't scared of recovery necessarily. I was scared of my whole world crumbling around while I was laying on the couch, which did not happen and will not happen.
I think going into it how you did is almost everything, like setting your intention before you went in to make this a learning experience. And I think that's actually a huge deal in attitude and sort of mental state. Because I know there's thousands of reasons people have surgery, and we don't always have that choice, right?
Right.
Sometimes it's right. But with something like this, where it is that choice and you have some time to prepare, going into it with that intention of learning experience, why you're doing it, your why. You wanted to arrive in Colorado and be able to be active. I mean, that's a huge motivator. So situation appropriate, if you are having surgery to fix something that's holding you back, I love that, of going into it with a strong intention of why, and then what can I learn about myself throughout this process? Because one of the things I always think about in regards to my meditation and mindfulness practices is kind of morbid, but this is what works for me. It's where I go, is if I couldn't move my body anymore, and the part of yoga that I could only do was meditation and, like, some of the more kind of obscure parts of yoga, could I do that now? Like, am I far enough in my yoga journey where if I couldn't do any more postures and I could just meditate, am I ready for that? Could I do that? And I think about that, like, what part of this practice can I employ no matter what? And for you during surgery, it's mindfulness, it's meditation, and perspective and all of that. Self-study, of course, which is part of yoga.
Yeah.
So really great job.
Thanks. I hope that this podcast, I guess maybe inspired someone just to, number one, not be afraid, because I was really afraid. And also, if you're in the situation where you're just sitting, like I said, that you'll get there. It is a mindset thing. So if you need to have a power pep talk with yourself today, I would encourage you to do that. If you're sitting on the couch and you're so sick of Netflix, be like, okay, here I go. I'm going to get out my phone and I'm going to say, what do I need to do today? Like, because it doesn't matter if you're sitting there. The doctor told you there's things you need to do, and so employ those and make those a part of your day so that you have a little bit of control over the situation, which will help your mindset, I think. Do you have any
Absolutely.
other, because I know you've had your fair share of injuries, and do you have any other like
You
tips and
know,
tricks?
I think the main thing is another perspective, is to trust that the only job your body is ever trying to do is come back to homeostasis and balance, and to trust your body's innate capacity to heal, which is honestly ultimately the only thing it's always ever doing anyway. It's always trying to heal. And so I think about when we're down for whatever reason, how can we create the conditions within our environment, within our body, for it to do its job? So that means even though you might not want to eat the healthy food, like, as healthy as you can, resting, water, just creating, like I heard this great analogy. You wouldn't stand over a plant demanding that it grow. You would create the right conditions through light and soil and water. And so thinking about that, tending to that within your own body so that it can grow and heal and continue to really repair all those tissues.
That is a beautiful way of saying it, like the plant, because you're right. You wouldn't stand over asking it to do something.
Right.
So, well, I guess we'll end with that. We appreciate everyone. We hope that this podcast lands well with you, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to Mindful Talk. We don't take it lightly that you spent your time listening to our podcast, and we are forever grateful. If you'd like to support the podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and a review. Welcome to a more mindful way of living and working.